Hi, Shannon Waller here, and welcome to the Team Success Podcast. Today, what we're going to talk about is how you approach a situation, especially if it did not go the way that you wanted. And everyone has a choice, and that is to complain or to create. Okay, and create a solution is what I mean by that. So let's just talk about our choice here in terms of complaining or creating. And I'm very well aware of the fact that sometimes complaining can be incredibly satisfying. It just feels really good to just moan and whine a little bit about a situation that's just irritated you, it's bugged you, you wish it hadn't happened, you're annoyed at the people involved. I totally get it. However, I'm going to make a very strong recommendation that you don't hang out there for very long. We're pretty clear with our team that what they need to do always, first of all, they have a choice to complain or create. And the one that is important to us is create. Create a solution. Take ownership of the situation. Do not be a victim. So we'll get into some strategies in just a moment. But let's just talk about what this complain or create continuum looks like, what this contrast looks like. So first of all, if you're in the complaining mode, and by the way, we all are at some point, so this is a fairly universal experience, it means you're very reactive. It means that things are happening to you, which can mean that you can feel like a victim sometimes. Often complaining happens when you don't feel like you have the capabilities to handle a situation, so you can be very hesitant or tentative about taking action. There's also an inbuilt passivity. Now, this is really interesting because some of the people who complain are quite active and they're loud about it. And it may sound like they're taking action, but they're not. They're just talking really loudly. But in terms of actually doing anything, they're actually incredibly passive. Again, that victim mentality, that things are happening to me, other people have more power than I do, it's not up to me to fix it, someone else should. That word should be a really big clue. Also, people who complain a lot tend to make the situation much more murky. They bring in red herrings. They pay attention to small details that actually are not core to the issue. They tend to confuse everything and get other people confused. And as a result of them doing that, again, because most people who complain do it to other people, is the situation gets worse. And this can be a little bit of a clue. I think of this sometimes with friends or sometimes with colleagues. Is the person who's complaining a lot, are they helping the situation or are they making it worse? And usually they're making it worse because they're involving other people in that anger, in that dissatisfaction, in that not taking action mentality. So now that we've talked about the bad side, let's talk about the good side. So what does it mean to create a solution as opposed to just complain about what you don't like? Well, first of all, as opposed to being reactive, you're creative. And there's a really interesting little factoid here is that the words reactive and creative have exactly the same letters, only rearranged. And I pretty much find that if I'm going to be creative, I have to rearrange my thinking from being reactive in order to make forward progress. So it means that you're creative. Obviously, as opposed to being passive, you're actually decisive and you take action. And as opposed to being a victim, you take ownership. You realize that you do have some power and control over the situation. The big insights for a lot of people in their maturing process, and this could happen at age 6 or age 60, it tends to be quite the span there, is they realize that something happens and they have a choice as to how they respond. And again, you can react or you can create. It's a powerful learning when we all get that we're not just victims here. We're not just passive recipients. We actually can take ownership over our response to that situation. And taking ownership, all of a sudden, all the power is back on you. You have what it takes. You're like, I can choose to respond differently to this. Now, sometimes you have to talk yourself off the ledge. Totally fine. That's appropriate, but you still can do it. And it is your choice. And what I really appreciate about people who are creative and decisive and take action and take ownership is they also tend to clarify the situation. It does not get more murky or muddy when they're involved. They tend to look at it and say, okay, what are the core essential elements? What can we do about this? Where do we have some control? Where do we have some influence? And all of a sudden, new possibilities open up that you didn't see before. And that's really powerful. That's a much more interesting and higher level conversation. So people who do this make things better. They make it clearer. So we all have a choice in every single situation about how we want to respond to something. And again, as I said, complaining can be really, really fun sometimes. But creating a solution is actually part of the long-term strategy. If you came from an environment, could be a neighborhood or a family or a school system that complained a lot, this might be your normal. Or maybe you, for whatever circumstances, were surrounded by people who did that a lot. That's not a very empowering environment to be in, and it probably has shaped your thinking a little bit in your actions. You, however, can take ownership of that and change it if you want to. So what are the strategies to actually help you move from that complaining mode into the creative mode? Well, first of all, what I want you to do is put a time limit on venting. It's very useful sometimes to just express that emotion. When we have negative things happen to us or around us, we do go into that kind of primal mode of fight, flight, or freeze. And you have to express that negative energy, preferably in a way that does not do harm. And if you are going to talk to someone else about it, make sure that this person is responsible and mature and not going to flip out because you're flipping out. We need to be responsible about with whom we're communicating. If you're a team leader, please don't complain to a team member. They're not going to know what to do with that. That's not demonstrating leadership in that moment. Talk to a friend, talk to a confidant, talk to your spouse. Just say, I just need you to listen to me for a moment, and then I promise I will get a grip and I will find a solution. I just have to get this off my chest. So put a time limit on venting, and a minute to 3 is probably good. You don't want to dwell here. Next thing to do is decide that you are not going to be a victim of circumstance. You are going to take ownership of the situation. You're going to find the possibilities. You're going to find a way to transform it in a way that you like a lot better. Then you want to get into action. You want to ask yourself or other people if they're talking to you, okay, now, what am I going to do about this? What are we going to do about this? What are you going to do about this? And be really clear. And that sometimes if you're talking to other people, they may go, like, okay, you need to get into action now. And I just had this conversation recently with a really brilliant entrepreneurial team leader, and he kind of hadn't realized that he was in that passive mode, and he really was not happy with the situation. It was causing him a lot of discomfort and stress. And I was like, I actually think you need to take action here. And I proposed a few things. He was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. And I could just see it. I have this huge advantage of being a sounding board, and I'm not emotionally tied to the situation. So I have that perspective that other people don't have. And I need other people to give me that perspective too. And that's the advantage of having a coach. But when you get into action, then that means you're doing something. And then what you want to do is learn from that action. Sometimes the things you'll do will work. Lots of times they won't. Doesn't matter. Just keep learning, keep learning, keep learning. And the fact that you're in motion is huge. You're going to learn by doing in this circumstance. So just to summarize how you can get into that creative mode as opposed to the complaining mode, put a time limit on venting if that's what your temptation is. Decide that you're not going to be a victim and take ownership. Ask yourself or whomever you're speaking with, now, what are we going to do about this? Very, very powerful question. And then learn by your actions. Learn by doing. Don't just talk about it, because that's kind of a clue of complaining. Take action. And what I really appreciate is the people I respect, the ones I look up to, the ones I look to model their behavior, are often not the loud ones. They're the quiet ones who are taking action. They're doing things. And often they're not talking about it because they don't have a need to. They're just quietly being productive and very profitable. And like, I want to be like you. So I hope this has inspired and excited you to, even if you're just tempted or around someone else who's in that complaining mode, to really shift your thinking and your mindset into that creative mode, because that's where we're powerful, that's where we're creative, and that's also where we're going to make the biggest impact. So thank you very much for listening. I hope this conversation inspires you. If you have any questions or comments, please let us know at questions@strategiccoach.com. And as always, here's to your team success. Hi, Shannon here, and thank you very much for listening. If you like what you heard today, please take a moment to rate the Team Success podcast on iTunes. And we'd love it if you'd share the podcast with anyone else who could benefit. If you're interested in learning more about the Strategic Coach program for entrepreneurs, visit us at strategiccoach.com or the Strategic Coach channel on YouTube. For free downloads and more team success strategies, visit teamsuccesshandbook.com.